In 2001, Grand Theft Auto 3 released on the PlayStation 2 and opened the world's eyes to a new kind of 3D open world game. Instead of being limited to cutscenes and text boxes to immerse the player, the open world genre gave developers a much better chance of convincing the player their environment was a real place. While the visuals of Liberty City helped to do just that, its cutscenes and overall narrative were generally seen as worth a chuckle at best. But in 2002, a game called Mafia released on PC and was the first open world game I remember with a major focus on character development and storytelling. At the time, I remember thinking they were way ahead of the curve, but in 20 years since Mafia 1 was released, there's only been 2 more games. And each game has done worse critically than the last. But that didn't stop me from randomly deciding to pick Mafia 3 up and start streaming it over at twitch.tv/poopbro420. Please follow. And since I lucked out on getting a PlayStation 5 during my playthrough, I could use Mafia 3 as a benchmark for the difference between a PS4 and a PS5. And needless to say, I understand why people who have a PS5 do not complain about the PS5 not having many games. But that's not why we're here today. I'm PoopBro420, and I'm here to tell you why Mafia 3, nearly 6 years after its release, is still worth your time. Like I was saying before, Mafia 1 released in 2002 on the PC, only 1 year after Grand Theft Auto 3. But production for Mafia 1 began in 1998. Czech developers Illusion Softworks wanted to make a game that emulated their favorite gangster movies like The Godfather and Goodfellas. This being the case, Mafia 1's gameplay, other than being in an open world, was completely different from Grand Theft Auto's approach. The police were much more realistic than any other game ever has or had been since. Running red lights, speeding, and even not using your turn signal could be the beginning of your rampage resisting the police. This did not set a precedent, and each Mafia since has stepped further and further from this approach. That doesn't mean it didn't have its fans, however. Then, in 2010, Mafia 2 came out, and it was fine. Which brings us to Mafia 3. Other than a few characters here and there, you don't need to have any knowledge of Mafia 1 and 2 to play Mafia 3. By the way, did you know that Mafia 1's original direction was going to be about a cop taking down the mob? Well, Mafia 3 was the developer's chance
to go for a game with a very similar direction.
Mafia 3 is the story of Vietnam veteran Lincoln Clay returning home from the war to his swampy Louisiana town of New Bordeaux, a town obviously inspired by New Orleans. It's 1968. The war is 7 years from ending, the hippie movement is in full swing, and racism is alive and well. It isn't long before Lincoln Clay gets a lick in New Bordeaux, and it's one of those, if we finish this job, we'll never have to do a single crime again kind of setups that Lincoln reluctantly agrees to. Lincoln was raised by a Haitian crime lord named Sammy, and he's really cool or something. This big job is Sammy's chance to get in good with the Italian mob, who seems to be in charge of the more wealthy parts of town. After you do a bank job that goes so horribly wrong that you literally kill hundreds of security guards and police officers simply doing their jobs to get away, put to really fun getaway music, by the way. The tone on this part was a little weird for me. Not sure what they were going for here, but I remember laughing and rolling my eyes constantly. Anyway, it isn't long before Lincoln Clay is betrayed with a bullet to the head. Except the bullet to the head doesn't kill Lincoln Clay because he's too pissed off to die. And you play the rest of the game with a scar going from your forehead to the back of your head. Lincoln explains that shooting someone in the forehead is actually the worst place you can shoot them because the bullet bounces off of their forehead. I've actually never heard this before. Once Lincoln Clay recovers from his near-death experience and realizes that everyone he knows and loves is dead, he begins a quest to formulaically take down the mob. If you've heard anything about Mafia 3, then you've probably seen how hard the game got dunked on during its release. Countless videos, including one made by one of my favorite creators named Crobcat, pointed out how barely playable the game was at release. While I did run into a few bugs that were pretty funny. Okay, time to kill Sal Marcano's son. Oh my god, this plant is in the way. And I can't destroy it. What do I do? He can't get over this plant. Oh no. Alright. It's alright. I have an idea. Moved it a little bit. Yay! See, now I can make permanent progress. That's how you gotta play this game. At this point, most of the major bugs have already been patched out. And I know this is just a matter of opinion, but nothing makes me laugh more than a good glitch. So Lincoln Clay is like a elite military government destabilizer or something, and those are the skills that he uses to take down the mob. The way this works on a gameplay level is you come to a part of town, you disturb whatever crime racket is going on there, drug dealing, human trafficking, and yes, even porn distribution. Once the racket is disturbed enough, the leader will come out of hiding. You recruit or kill him, and then you move on to the next one. Eventually, enough rackets will be disturbed that the main leader of the area will now come out of hiding, and these are usually presented as narrative-heavy missions that are more like what we're used to seeing from Mafia 1 and 2. Now, I'm not going to sit here and act like Mafia 3 has great gameplay. It doesn't. But Mafia has never been a series that its gameplay was a saving grace. It's the narrative that made it stand out. It's probably the only series I can think of where I have trouble remembering the main character's name, but all of the other characters live rent-free in my head. Paulie from Mafia 1 was a character who you got to see have a successful rise in the mob and a very expected outcome. And I'm not just talking a bullet to the head. You see Paulie coming to the realization that he is screwed. Joe Barbaro from Mafia 2 was the main character's best friend and pretty much stole the show as far as I'm concerned. And same thing as Paulie. You see him rise and fall, and not to get too deep into it, but it really hurts seeing that one fall. My biggest complaint with Mafia 3 is that there is no character like this. Nobody steals the show. You can tell they're trying to have that character be Donovan, who is Lincoln Clay's advanced CIA-trained war buddy and best friend, from what I can tell. And yeah, he's kinda cool, I guess.
I don't remember. At home, I believe. I don't remember. At home, I believe.
But I don't get where they were trying to go with him. Let me throw a spoiler warning your way real quick, and let me try to explain. Warning, you're about to see a spoiler for a 6-year-old game that nobody likes. Throughout the entire game, most of its cutscenes are done in a past tense documentary style. Certain characters that are presented as bystanders in the story are seen much older and reflecting on everything. While this was a little neat at first, this whole thing falls flat. You can tell whoever wrote the story really thought this Father James character was going to seem super deep and philosophical, but I think not nearly enough time was invested into him. Probably the biggest reason the game failed, in my opinion, personally. But let me get to Donovan. Every time you see Donovan's documentary cutscenes, he's shown in front of some kind of military tribunal? I'm not really sure, but he's basically testifying that everything Lincoln Clay did to take down the mob, and Donovan is explaining how justified everything is from Lincoln's perspective. A lot of these parts just seem like they were trying really hard to have these gotcha moments. But all it made me think was, but wouldn't they just respond to that, like, negatively?
Did you help Lincoln Clay murder Sal Marcano and all prominent members of his crime family?
You're goddamn right I did.
At the very end of the game, this all culminates in Donovan finishing his story in front of this tribunal with a senator, which is being filmed. Randomly, Donovan pulls out a gun and is like, "Actually, when I was digging through the records, I saw you were the one that killed Jack Kennedy." Donovan then shoots the senator 2 times. The cameramen just sit there and keep filming because they've never seen so much truth in their life, and Donovan strolls out of there. As far as we can tell, he makes it to the parking lot, starts up his car, and leaves. This doesn't make any sense, and Donovan as a character doesn't make any sense. He's supposed to be this like super high up CIA operative, but he literally just does whatever the hell he wants. He may harp on and on about how much he wants to protect America's interests, but I actually had a lot of trouble understanding how the CIA never just turned the faucet off on him. It doesn't really matter, and part of me feels like I've already put more time into thinking about how Donovan is supposed to work than the developers did, so let's move on. I picked up Mafia 3 because I had been playing Elden Ring, and I got 70 hours into it with no end in sight. I absolutely love this game, but sometimes you just need a safe, dumb game to play. Something that requires so little thought that you can just autopilot it. And that's what Mafia 3 is for me. Combat in Mafia 3 is as simple as rolling up to a mission location from the open world map, trying to use stealth for as long as possible, and then when you do inevitably get seen, you'll kill the remainders like normal. You also have this like Assassin's Creed Brotherhood like system where you can hold down the L1 button to bring up a wheel where you can spawn vehicles or a backup crew, or even get rid of your wanted level if you have enough resources. Speaking of wanted levels, I wanted to talk a little bit about how the game uses racism as more than just a coat of paint. If you're in a poor black neighborhood and you start committing crimes, you can hear the police on the police radio going, there seems to be some trouble going on in the hollow. If you guys aren't doing anything else, can you go out and check it out if you want anyway? Whereas if you do the same thing in a rich white neighborhood, the police radio goes something along the lines of, "There's a colored fella executing white people in Sandy Shores, hurry!" And the cops will get there almost instantly and in higher numbers too. Even certain business establishments will try to stop you at the front door if they're a whites only place. In my opinion, having a game that has you actually presented with gameplay being affected by your race, and instead of it being shown to you in a cutscene, was pretty effective. When you start a new game, there's a white text on a black background screen that explains how there's a lot of really bad language in this video game, but the developers believe it's important that we remember this part of our history. I think so too. A huge benefit to so much time having passed since the release of the game, other than bug fixes, is that most versions of the game come with all the DLCs now, which I have to say, you should do these as soon as you can. They each introduce new types of gameplay, like one where you get an indestructible car and use it to tear a neighborhood into pieces by driving through everything monster truck style. One thing that I really liked and wish was much longer was the one where they introduced crime scene investigation, where you actually pick up items and examine them, kind of like LA Noire. It's super hollow, but I'm just too much of a sucker for anything detective-like in my video games. Not to mention, the DLCs all give some of the best rewards in the game, which will help you get more money to buy those upgrades. Which I'm not going to lie, getting money and buying new guns and upgrades became one of my favorite parts of the gameplay loop. Things like decorating my cars with cool decals that I earned by finishing races, which I got the money to purchase the vehicle upgrades needed thanks to my heroin racket, or getting all the weapon upgrades and feeling unstoppable were both strangely satisfying to me. Mafia 3 is a testament, in my opinion, that every game can't be a super heavy experience that redefines the wheel. Sometimes you need something that's just good enough, where the paint on the walls is enough to overlook how boring the house is that you're inside of. And Mafia 3 on a PS5 is a damn fine paint job. So turn auto aim on, turn off the thinking part of your brain, and don't forget, you can do things like this in this game. Thanks for watching.